So I was in here.
You're back your mind again today. I hate to give you to other people, share it with other people. I want to talk about a couple of things and then we'll get into our next chapter, but I want to talk about our speaker from last time. And then I want to talk about the second part of the paper that I did push back so that we had a little bit more of a chance to talk about it. So those two things, and then we'll get back into this. I'm just curious, what did you, between us, like leave this room, but what did you think of the QPR, their presentation, the whole thing? Any thoughts or anything? And again, I won't necessarily share that with them, but was that a him or they? Oh, I got excited. Helpful, not helpful? What do you think?
I thought it was helpful because I've never thought to ask the question or
Sure.
I still feel awkward asking that, but just hearing them talk about it, getting more comfortable with that idea, I thought that was helpful.
Okay, good. I'm glad, right? At the very least, those resources are super helpful, right? I've used those phone numbers before. I've given them to people, the text crisis line, and given that to people before. I've walked students to the health center before with any crisis, definitely things that pop up. Anybody else? Helpful, not helpful? And again, please feel free to be honest. This is just between us. Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was that, what they were saying, was against what we were really taught completely culturally,
Okay.
is that we don't really address other people, that kind of specifics of how they be it, anything, marital problems, are you worried about money, are you worried about you drink too much, and you usually give people their space. And that's what we're all conditioned to do culturally all the way through, is to give people their space.
Sure.
And for them to say, it's really the most beneficial thing is to rather boldly address this. They're really asking us to go against almost everything our culture is telling us. It's really 180, but the goal is to say the life. That's super important.
Yeah, but it's tough when we tend to kind of mind our own business a lot of the time, but we're not putting ourselves into somebody else's issue, the business happens going on, to get in there and ask something so direct. It's intimidating, right? And I know the role plays are awful. Trust me, role plays are awful, right? Here's your scenario, act trouble, ready, go, right? I know they're miserable, but I understand their point of wanting you to ask that question. I've had to ask people about suicidality more times than I can count. I mean, as a therapist, when I was training to be a therapist, this was something that came up all the time, right? And honestly, it was a big reason why I stopped being a therapist, because I knew that if I had a client that took their life, I don't think I ever would have recovered. Personally, I would have felt like somehow it was on me that I didn't do enough. Even if they had made up their mind and there was nothing I could do, it would have impacted me greatly. I mean, I've had clients who were suicidal. I had to worry if they came back. I've had students who were suicidal. I had to worry if they're going to come back. My mom growing up attempted suicide multiple times, right? And so this is something that I'm definitely very familiar with, and I think it's a hard topic for anyone who's known someone who's suicidal, right? And it's really hard to ask those questions. Personally, I tend to think that it's always better to overreact to somebody's expressed suicidality than to underreact. People will forgive you for caring too much about them and overreacting, but can you forgive yourself for not doing enough? That's always been my personal motto. And does that put maybe too much responsibility on me? Sure. Have I made people angry with that before? Yes. Right. That whole people aren't going to get mad at you. People get mad at me, right? That's not, in my opinion, that's not always true. Most of the time people are grateful, but I've definitely had people get defensive and mad, which I think in itself is a little bit telling, right? If you're that angry and upset about it, there might be something there, right? Yeah. Sure.
Like people in therapist.
Yeah, so I did 1,500 hours as a marriage and family therapist intern, which means I had the degree and I was training as an intern. And then after you do 3,000 hours, you take the exam. I was half of the way through, right? And then you have to take the exam and get licensed. So I was teaching part-time and counseling part-time. And for me, the telling moment was I found that I looked forward to teaching and I dreaded therapy, right? When I was in a counseling session, I would watch the clock and wait for it to be over. When I was teaching, I'd watch the clock and wish we had more time. And for me, that was so telling, right? It was so heavy all the time. Like it was constantly like going home, feeling weighted down by all of the things that people were struggling with. I'm a very like empathetic person. And so it was hard for me to leave that at work. People who are therapists, you have to have good boundaries. You have to be able to leave that stuff at work or talk to another therapist about it, which is allowed. We'll talk about that more in the last chapter. But I would go home and I hated not being able to tell my partner about everything. That's just, as a person, I like to talk, right? Like it was hard for me to not share that stuff. And it was just, I found that like when I was teaching, I'd be excited and upbeat and happy. And in counseling, it was always just so emotional and heavy. Like, and you don't see progress quickly a lot of the time. And that can start to take a toll. I loved it. It wasn't like I was bad at it. It just, I found that I really looked forward to teaching more, right? So I just kind of gravitated one way and then never looked back. Not sure that I regret it either. I would do it the same way if I were to go back and do it again. Luckily, my degree was broad enough that I could do either. So that's always nice. Psychology is so flexible that way, which I appreciate. But again, I think it would be better, in my mind at least, to take it seriously and overreact, give people resources than to not do anything. And I also think it's important to know the audience, right? To know the person, right? Like my mother-in-law says stuff like, I'm going to kill myself. She says it left and right. Like it's just nothing. Like she messed up a meal last week. She's cooking dinner tonight for me. I'm terrified. She's going to food poison me. She food poisons me all the time and I'm not looking forward to it. She's making fish. That's a really bad one for somebody who can't cook. So wish me luck or pray for me. I don't know. But my mother-in-law all the time, like something doesn't go right. She's like, I'm going to kill myself. I'm like, Mom, that's super insensitive. Stop, right? Like, I don't take it seriously because I know her. Some people throw that stuff out really casually. And other people, it's looking for those subtle signs, you know, like if you have a friend or a family member who's depressed and suicidal, you likely will see it, right? And so little things that we can do to be there for them, I think are important. And hopefully now you just have a little bit more in your toolkit if it does come up. Yeah. 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 Right, like you're not thinking about doing this, are you, right? Like, yeah, that's very meaningful. So I do wish she hadn't said you guys killed it today. I was super insensitive. I like told that to everyone I know. I'm like, and I saw her yesterday, she was in the other class yesterday, and she's like, I cannot believe this. Will you apologize for me? I was like, sure. And then she's like, no, I'm like, it's not even better. Like, it's not even better. So yeah, she felt really bad about that. She's like, I just got caught up in the moment. I didn't tell them I didn't do that. I was like, I will let them know. But I told everyone I know, I'm like, oh my God, you won't. They told me suicide training. Like, it's so bad. So the looks on your face though, like everyone was like, oh. Finding humor in what you can. It's not a funny topic, right? But we have to try and make light of what we can. But she said she was sorry. So I told her I would pass that along. Any other like thoughts or comments, anything else about the training or anything like that? They came yesterday. I feel like you got the way better version, if that makes you feel better. I had a different person yesterday as the helper, and I think you got the really good version of it. So be grateful. Hold on to that certificate, put it on a resume, put it on an application. Anything you can put on a resume or application to make you stand out looks good. So make sure that you include that if you're applying to a school or a job. It couldn't hurt, right? You are a certified suicide prevention training, like you've completed that. It always looks good to have that kind of stuff. Make sure that you look at chapter 7. I did assign that to you previously. At the very least, know what QPR stands for, right? What does QPR stand for? What's the Q? Question, persuade, refer, right? People always think response, but it's refer, right? Refer. So just remember what those three elements stand for. Obviously you'll have a study guide for the exam, which we'll talk about later today. The other thing I want to talk about is the second part of the paper. All right, so I'm gonna go here to Canvas for a moment. So it was originally due today. So hopefully you have made some progress on starting it. If you have not, you don't need to admit that. It will be due on Monday. But the second part of the paper is due on Monday. And I just want to talk for a few minutes about that. Where did it go? Too many things. Okay. So the second part of the paper, and I changed the due date on here. For the second part, what I'm looking for here is this is an outline and source. So outline and source. That's worth 40 points. So please make sure that you spend some time on this 40 points. It's a lot more than that first 10-point part. Okay. Big thing, 10 points of this, 10 points right off the bat is an academic source. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to look for when I open your paper. Did you select an academic source? I remember I had you watch that library video that Jasmine, the one who presented to you, was the one who did that. She kind of had a little bit of a crossover, which is fun. So all of you could use the DSM. Make sure it's a DSM-5. But you could all use the DSM as an academic source. This could be a journal. It could be a book other than our textbook. Those are probably the most common ones, but make sure that you have an academic source, right? Like Wikipedia, not an academic source. Any .com, .org, any of those things, not academic. So make sure you have at least one. I'm not worried about the formatting yet. We'll talk more about formatting for the final paper, but you need to have an academic source listed. Again, every single one of you could use the DSM. It's going to have the criteria for the disorder that you're looking at in it. Great reference, it's academic, but make sure you have an academic source. That's worth 10 of the 40 points. It's the first thing I'm going to look for. If you look at the rubric down here at the bottom, right, again, 10 points. If you give me a non-academic source, you'll get 5 points, right? So you still get partial, and no source, you'll get 0. Okay, so please make sure that you focus on that library video that I shared with you before. They go over some ways to access those online, but you could all use the DSM if you wanted. The rest of the paper, the other 30 points, is just progress toward your final paper. Okay, and what I often see on this, and it's totally fine, is people oftentimes have bullets. And I don't mind if it's bulleted thoughts, right? Like maybe you have some examples from the show that you want to like make note of. Maybe you've written some of it. Maybe you wrote your summary and then you have bulleted thoughts afterwards. The format of it doesn't matter as much to me, as long as I'm seeing that you have progress toward your paper. Okay, so maybe you have thoughts about a diagnosis and all of the criteria written out. Or you have thoughts about like scenes from the movie you want to use, or causes or treatment. I'm just looking to see that you have, as it's set up here, you go up, 2 to 3 pages of content, right, toward your final paper. What I'm trying to help you do is not wait to do all of it until the last minute, right, by having you kind of get some of this down. So maybe you have, like I said, thoughts about a diagnosis or examples or thoughts about causes and treatments or just character stuff. More than the formatting. I don't mind if you give me bullets or maybe like a paragraph and then some bullets. I'm just looking to see that you have 2 to 3 pages of progress. The biggest ways that you'll lose points on this is not giving me an academic source and not giving me enough, right? Like giving me like a page or maybe just like barely 2 pages of information. So that's really what I'm looking for you to do. Start thinking about your character. Start getting some thoughts about diagnosis. Maybe you've narrowed it down to like 2 or 3, but you're not sure yet. Totally fine. But get your thoughts on that down so that you have it for the final paper. When you are ready to do this again, it'll be due on Monday. You'll be turning it in here online. So right here where you hit start assignment, just like you did on that first one, and you'll upload that file onto Canvas. Okay. So those are the big things for now. Don't worry about formatting as much as content, right? The final paper, we'll talk about EPA style and format, but for now, it can be in any format you want, as long as you have a source and you have that couple pages of progress toward your paper. Yeah.
Let's say for a comparison of that shows and stuff between like.
Yeah. You can write about both, right? So what oftentimes people will do, and I've seen this work really well, is they'll choose one. And then they'll take another paragraph to talk about the other one. Like, oh, I had some thoughts that it might be this, but it didn't quite fit, but you still kind of talk about it a little bit. And I've seen that work really, really well. Sometimes too, your movie might not portray the disorder correctly. That happens a lot in the media. And so you can say it fits this except for a couple of things which gave you some other thoughts. And if you go back to modules, I've given you a few sample papers on here. Right here, there's some papers that got A's in the past. And a few of them did that in there, right? Where they picked like one or two disorders. They focus on one, but then spend a little bit of time talking about what they also thought that didn't quite fit. And you can disagree if they're diagnosed in the movie, you can disagree with that or the show. And if they don't make it through the movie or show, you know, what would you have done to help them should they have survived? Anything else for now about this? Again, don't worry about formatting, just content, and then obviously the source. That's really the biggest thing here. I'll look for it right off the bat. So don't forget that. It's an easy 10 points to get. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else for now? All right. I'm going to talk at the end a little bit about our schedule, the next like coming days that we have, but let's go into chapter 9 for now. And then I'll wait till the end to do that. Our next chapter that we're looking at, we've wrapped up mood and suicidality. We have eating disorders and substance disorders that are left. And there's really only like 3 disorders in this chapter that we'll look at. But these are relatively common disorders. A lot of people struggle with eating disorders. And there's something that tend to be hard to treat, because think how many times a day we're hungry or that we have to eat. Right? There's a complicated relationship that we can have with food. So we'll talk about anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, and then some causes and some treatments. And eating disorders as a group are disorders where there's a significant disturbance in eating. Right? So a person eats or refuses to eat in order to satisfy like a psychological or psychic need rather than a physical one. So maybe you're hungry, but you don't eat because you don't want to gain weight. Or you're full and you continue to eat because you just can't stop, right? There's a lot of different ways this can manifest. You're basically ignoring your bodily signals, or maybe you've even hit a point where you're no longer aware of them. That can happen sometimes as well. But what makes this tricky is a lot of people have problematic eating patterns that aren't necessarily a disorder, but that you might be kind of on the path to one, or you have some red flags, but you're not quite there. And food can be complicated. Super, super easy example. How many of you eat when you're bored? By show of hands. Oh, I am so guilty of this one, right? Like I eat when I'm bored. I would like mindlessly eat when I'm bored. How many of you go out to eat to celebrate something good happening? Yep. Good grades as a kid. We went to Baskin Robbins every time. Like every time I got all A's, we went out for ice cream. I got a lot of A's because I liked ice cream, right? Or cake. Like my family gets cake for no reason. It's Tuesday. Let's get a cake, right? Like why not? That's a true story. We got a cake yesterday for like no reason. It was Tuesday. Food can be complicated. I eat when I grade. It's almost like mindless. I oftentimes eat when I'm sad. I eat when I'm happy. Like I won't go to a movie unless there's popcorn. Like why go to a movie if I'm not going to have popcorn and a soda and candy? Like I'll see anything if I can have those 3 things. Right? The holidays are all about food in my family. I told you Disneyland, I didn't say a thing about the rides. I wanted to go for the churros, right? And I did. I ate a million churros. Like 6. That's a lot in 2 days though. 6 churros. It's pretty respectable, I think. Especially when I wasn't feeling well. I still ate them anyway. I like have a complicated relationship with food, and a lot of people do. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have an eating disorder, but they might be things that you might want to be maybe a little more aware of, right? They might be red flags, just something to keep an eye on. So with the disorders that we'll talk about, all of them have those things in common, right? That you're ignoring bodily signals, or maybe eating or not eating more for like a psychological reason than a physical one. And I have a little, there's a documentary that was called Thin. It's a really like popular documentary. It's getting a few years old. There's also a few more that I have on the last slide that are a little newer. But I'm going to play, there's like a little 6-minute intro to it where they summarize a few things. And I think it gives you a good human picture of this if you haven't ever known anyone with an eating disorder. So I'm going to play that for you. And you don't have to do kind of what this can look like, right? And how emotional this can be for a lot of individuals as well. You know, this can be a very difficult thing for people to battle, right? And it can be ongoing. And I will start with anorexia. I wrote some of the stuff up here, but I think having that little bit of a perspective, if you haven't known anyone with this, can be helpful. Sorry, it's stuck. So as I said, there are 3 main eating disorders. The first one is anorexia. Yeah, there used to be only 2, but we added a 3rd one. So anorexia or anorexia nervosa is the full name. The key with this disorder is that it's someone who has an intense fear of gaining weight, okay, a very distorted body image, and they tend to have a pursuit of extreme thinness, and oftentimes really restrictive eating as a result. So there are 3 main criteria for it that I wrote down. The first is a refusal to maintain a, quote, normal body weight for somebody's height and age. Now, since that is incredibly difficult to define, normal, I mean, there are lots of charts that say where you should be in what range for like your height and your age. We say less than 85%. So by definition of this disorder, somebody is very underweight. Okay, they are very thin, even though they might not see themselves that way. There's an intense fear of gaining weight. And because of an intense fear of gaining weight, there tends to be a lot of very restrictive eating. Starving yourself, oftentimes ignoring the fact that you're hungry and just not eating because you're afraid every little thing that you put into your system will make you gain weight. And then there's a disturbance in the view of your body. Sometimes we say this is an undue influence of weight on your self-evaluation. The woman, or the young woman in the film, you see her draw a picture of herself, right? And then they trace her. And you can see that the picture that she drew of herself is considerably larger than her actual body frame. And then she writes like all these help me, abdominoplasty, need to tone, but there's this obsession. Your view of yourself dictates your worth as a person. Your weight and your worth are very tied together in a very like undue kind of way. Yeah.
So is body dysmorphia ever considered like it's a standalone diagnosis, or is it just part of having of being anorexic?
Sure. So body dysmorphic disorder is its own disorder, and it cannot be due to weight. Okay, so that's what the one, like, it's a great question, right? Because they're often confused. If somebody only has like a disturbance in the view of themselves related to weight, then they would fit here. If it's like, oh, my nose, my hand, like it's some other part of their body, then it would be body dysmorphic disorder. So it's actually like an exclusionary criteria that they can't only have it related to weight. It's a great question. So again, this individual, typically very thin, much more common in women than in men. Now, there are a lot of cases of men struggling with this, but it's way more common in women. And the most common age is between 14 to 18 years old. Interesting, there's more and more cases of this occurring in men, but sometimes with men, we see that men have this pressure to be larger and more muscular, right, rather than thin, right? Thinness equating to beauty is more common with women. Men being like bigger and stronger is tending to be viewed as more attractive. So this is way more common in women, and women that are younger, like 14 to 18 years old. And it could take a real big toll, right? If you're not eating food, you're not getting that nutrition. It can take a toll on your health. People lose their hair, they stop getting menstrual cycles, right? There can be a lot of issues that come from this. But the biggest thing is someone who's really restrictive, afraid to gain weight, and they have that disturbance in the way that they view themselves. It's very common with this disorder. The other big one is bulimia. I'm going to erase those two. Bulimia, or bulimia nervosa, which would be the full name. People have a slightly different presentation, right? They have what we sometimes call binge purge syndrome, right? They're having
binges of eating, followed by purging it in some way, followed by compensatory behaviors to get rid of the food that you have eaten. So people are eating way too much, and then they compensate for it by getting rid of it in some way so that they don't gain weight. So the first criteria here is there's recurrent episodes of binge eating. And to say a little more about binge eating, we say eating within a 2-hour period. You eat more, the way they phrase it is an amount of food larger than most would eat. Okay, now that's super subjective. What I eat versus what you eat might be very different, right? So it's basically somebody who eats within a 2-hour period of time, an incredible amount of food, right? So you're eating, it's a more than most. The other thing that happens here is there's a lack of control during the binge. You can't stop. You have a hard time stopping. Now, I guarantee that every single one of you in here at some point has binged before. Doing this every now and then is not a big deal. On Halloween, I will binge like crazy. I will eat more candy than most people would eat and not feel bad about it. Right? I am looking forward to it, if anything, right? I can eat more cake than most people would eat. I'm confident in that statement, right? Like I can put down cake and candy, like sweets, I can eat more than most. But there's a difference between the occasional binge, like you ate way too much pizza and you made yourself sick, okay? Versus like doing this recurrently. People have recurrent episodes, meaning they're doing this repeatedly, where they eat a whole lot within a short period of time and they're unable to stop. It's like you just keep putting it in, even though you're full, you make yourself sick even, and you can't stop eating during that period of time. So it goes beyond like the occasional incident. Then you have what are called compensatory behaviors. You compensate for the food that you've eaten to prevent weight gain. What are some ways that somebody might compensate for eating way too much food? How might you compensate for eating too much to try and get rid of it? Yeah. Over-exercising, really common. I'm gonna go exercise for hours and make sure I burn it all off. Yeah. Yeah, throwing it up. Anyone think of another one? There's at least one more that's relatively common. Laxatives to make it all come out the other end, right? So you're purging in some way. You're compensating for the food that you ate to prevent weight gain. That's kind of the defining characteristic of this disorder, that you have these recurrent episodes of binge eating, and then you compensate in order to avoid gaining weight. The last thing is these binges and behaviors. So let's say binges and compensatory behaviors, just gonna abbreviate that, occur on average. What do they say? It is 2 times a week for 3 months. Or at least 3 months. So again, this isn't a one-time thing, right? It's like on average 2 times a week for at least 3 months. Some people it's 2 times a day, multiple times a day, but it's at least twice a week for at least 3 months. And then the same last criteria, right? You have that same disturbance in the view of your body. This is also most common in the same age group of women, right? But we see this a lot, right? People like they eat an incredible amount and then they purge it or compensate and get rid of it in some way in order to avoid gaining weight. So those are the 2 main presentations. And sometimes what can happen is people don't fit one or the other neatly. And so we would say they have an eating disorder not otherwise specified. Maybe they have some combination of the 2. Maybe they are overweight, but they're engaging in very classic anorexic type behaviors, right? Or they don't quite meet all these criteria. They're like having restrictive eating and then binges, right? So if people don't fit neatly, we might say they have like some combination of the 2. But those are the 2 really big ones that people tend to struggle with. Yeah.
Why? This is, do you think this is a behavior, seems like a fair amount of the things we discussed are problems that have existed for thousands of years in terms of abnormal mental frameworks. Do you think this is something that people did 100 years ago? Do you think that bulimia and let's say existed in some form 100 years ago? And if it didn't, then may I ask why? Why do you think it didn't?
A really big part of these disorders is cultural, right? And the cultural standards and views, which have changed a lot.
Yeah.
But if you go back to like the 1950s, for example, Marilyn Monroe, right, was like the epitome of ubiquitous. She was not a thin person, like, by our current definitions of a thin, right? She was much more full figured. And if you go back even farther than that, like being overweight was considered a sign of money. You had enough money to have enough food to eat and be overweight, right? So I think a lot of this is very cultural. There's definitely evidence of people struggling with these things, but the prevalence has just shot through the roof from like, let's say like the 1950s, really starting in the 80s is when these things took off.
So it is, I actually think this is relevant. Frankly, you were a professional, so you actually, no offense, you agree with me, you think it's, say, a phenomenon, say, well, say a generation or so ago.
Yeah, I
That's the
mean,
reason.
I would feel comfortable seeing that it's probably always been around.
I see.
But I think that the prevalence of it, how often it's occurring and how frequently it's occurring has gone through the roof since I would say like the 80s. In the 1980s is when we started to see the epitome of female beauty being like sick and thin, like really, really thin. And so then what we saw was these things kind of really developing out of that. They were around before then, but the prevalence of them has gone up incredibly. It was much, much lower before the.
There's one more that's very similar to this. I want to mention it. Binge eating disorder. Right. And I have the criteria up here. With this disorder, people binge, but they don't purge. Okay. So this is a newer addition. This one was added in the DSM-5. Okay. So this is very new. But with this disorder, people have binge eating episodes. And in that binge, right, they're eating an unusually large amount of food quickly, right? They're eating until they're uncomfortably full, maybe even eating alone because they're embarrassed. It's the whole idea of being a closet eater, right? You eat out of the view of other people. And then you have feelings of disgust, depression, or guilt afterward, but you don't purge. So this individual tends to gain a lot of weight from these binges. Right. So it's a different presentation here, right? Like instead of binging then purging to avoid weight gain, you binge, but you never purge. And so you end up gaining weight. Kim, lovely Kim, but go back to Kim. Kim came up in our house like 3 times this weekend. I have no idea why, but Kim, binge eater to the extreme. She would have food hidden in her closet, literally in the drawers of her closet, and would eat it privately. She used to be a very large woman, 300 plus pounds. Before having a gastric bypass surgery like 10 years ago. Now she's very, very thin. But 10 years ago or like 15 years ago when I met her, really large, very overweight person. And she gained an incredible amount of weight because of these binges. She would just sit in her house in private and eat, right? And then feel awful about herself afterward, right? And that's very common with this disorder. I remember watching her house once way back when she was still like, we still talk to her. And in her closet, she just had rows and rows and rows of candy bars. And my partner was like, I'm going to show you, but don't touch, because she like knows where each one of them is, how many she has, and so on. And I remember she opened a drawer and it was like hundreds of candy bars. It would be like my heaven. I was like, oh my gosh, I want them. Like I wanted them so bad. It was like 50 Snickers followed by like 50 things of M&Ms. I was way too excited about that. And then she's like, no. She knows exactly how many are in there. Often like similar to the, like someone who's an alcoholic would know exactly how much alcohol they have and where it is, right? So there's this element of like addiction here. It's eating to make yourself feel better, but oftentimes there is a weight gain that comes with it because you're no longer purging. Anyone who knows people with anorexia or bulimia or binge eating disorder, any questions or stories or thoughts, anything you want to share at all? Is that a hand? Yeah, go for it.
My sister-in-law was severely sick for about pretty much since she was a little girl.
Sure.
And she just like is now fully recovered, which is awesome. She's fantastic.
Even more awesome, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Countless amount of times.
Yeah.
Refuse to really build that bridge and let this help, needs to be healthy. And it's a really gruesome, like, disturbing kind of process. to me. Like,
Yeah.
People don't seem to not understand just how difficult it is for someone to really accept the fact that your body needs nutrients.
Right.
Just basically nutrients.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of astonishing. You never know people's perspective on it, but they're eating something that's like what is taught in all of this. So that's kind of what I have to say about it.
Yeah.
Very interesting if you ever got a chance to sit down with this.
Right.
Like if you're going into the field of psychology, I would recommend doing it because you learn so much about it in such a different perspective that it's astonishing.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, right? I mean, it seems like such basic knowledge that your body needs fuel to run, right? Like if you don't put fuel in the tank, you're not gonna function, you're not gonna have energy. But somebody who everything about them, their entire identity becomes about their weight, right? And what they eat or don't eat. And it really can be very grueling. It can be so difficult. So it's wonderful to hear that, like, that she's gotten like into a good spot. It can take people a lot of effort to get treated for this and to be in a healthy spot with food. Right? It can-
But I found that this is a pattern one.
Yeah.
And just being just in general, I drink a lot of energy drinks.
Yeah.
They're low carb, but like give you the energy throughout the day, so never the same.
Yeah, can be a red flag, right? A lot of caffeine, right? Because caffeine is a natural stimulant that like reduces your hunger, right? Everyone who's like has coffee, they're like hiding, right? Nothing wrong with those things, right? Energy drinks, coffee, all those things are fine, right? But it can be a red flag when somebody that's all they're doing is consuming liquids, especially things that are stimulants that tend to curb appetite, right?
To go off kind of what she said, my buddy's girlfriend's friend who lives down in Orange County, she refused to eat anything, she would only drink energy drinks because she ate, she was bloated.
Yeah.
And, I told her that, just eat and then go exercise, and she would always go iron, she would pass out if she tried to run too fast, and it was gnarly, but then I also found out she has OCD.
Yeah.
So my question is, these eating disorders sound like a lot of, same criteria as OCD.
Mhm.
Are there any crossovers, and could it be just a symptom of a larger OCD?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? There is a lot of comorbidity, which means they occur together between OCD and eating disorders, also depression and eating disorders. So a lot of eating disorders is thought to be related to control. And OCD is very related to control, trying to control what you can't, right? So there actually does tend to be a lot of crossover, a lot of connection. And OCD might be the underlying cause of an eating disorder or vice versa, right? And so oftentimes it's trying to figure out which one came first. And if you could treat one, it oftentimes helps with the other. There's a very high co-occurrence of the two because much of eating disorder stuff is related to control. I can control what I put in my body. I can control what comes out of my body, right? And it's grasping for that control. And it's a very common element. Yeah. It definitely happens. Do you have a-
The follow-up, I know with OCD, there's a lot of, studies come out, and there are a lot of data with regards to psychedelics and the treatment of OCD. And my question to you is, have you heard of any psychedelics in their treatment of eating disorders?
I mean, it's definitely not anything that's mainstream. It's interesting. There's like a growing wave of using psychedelic drugs as part of therapy. It's problematic. It's interesting, right? Like it's kind of like a provocative idea, right? Like we put you on a psychedelic, you will alter your state of mind, and it can help with trauma. It can help with couples like we're fighting. But then it also creates this whole other host of issues, right? Like, okay, I'm fine when I'm on the psychedelic. And so now you're creating this potential addiction struggle to these, drugs that help someone get into an altered state. It's so mixed, but it is definitely something that is growing in popularity, but it's also incredibly controversial. It's like replacing one issue with another. And when we talk about substance disorders, sometimes you give someone a substance to get them off of another substance. Yeah, like nicotine patches or methadone to get off of heroin. Are you just creating another issue? But that issue might be less than the original one, oh, it's so controversial, but so I haven't necessarily, I wouldn't say that it is like in any way a popular treatment, but I'm sure it's being used. There's a lot of people exploring that kind of stuff right now. Seeing it more and more, especially with trauma, of like, let's give you some kind of mind altering trip where you are then able to view it in a different way. Really dangerous in some ways, but fascinating in others, right? Yeah.
I think with a lot of these treatments, the first dose and the only dose is usually a very high dose.
Yeah,
So it's an experience that's so intense
and you can't ever get back to it.
and you can't ever get back to it. And so I can see where.
Yeah.
Absolutely that addiction can come, but where they did a study, they took terminal cancer patients.
Yeah.
That, they would have had this intense fear of dying
Mhm.
and gave them psychedelics, and a lot of these people felt, absolutely no fear after the
Yeah.
experience, no fear of that death.
Mhm.
And had no, wanting to go into an experience like that again.
Yeah.
Because it was so intense.
Interesting, right? I mean, and I tend to be very open-minded. So in my mind, I'm like, there's potential, but I also see that there's some serious downsides too. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's popular right now. It's definitely a popular like idea right now. Did you had your hand up a bit ago? Yeah.
Either, I'm not sure if she had been or anorexia, but she's talking about experience trauma. And not, I'm assuming it was sexual picture.
Yeah.
And wanting to be so within that she would disappear. I'm currently in recovery for an eating disorder, and in the treatment group that I was in earlier this year. It was a combination of all women who had suffered from trauma. And it was a combination of and everybody had an eating disorder of some sort.
Yeah.
And both women who binged and who purged or just completely, abstained from eating.
Mhm.
It was all for the same reason. Some women just wanted to be so like large and continue to gain weight so that nobody would touch them.
Right.
And people wanted to disappear.
Mhm.
So I just thought that was an interesting connection between the two. Sort of that to be so different and on opposite ends of the scale, but
Yeah.
possibly have like a similar or are in response to a similar situation. Just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and again, thank you for sharing. Like it is a lot of it, so when people experience some kind of trauma, especially maybe a sexual trauma, they've been robbed of all control. And again, we come back to control of I can control that I'm so large that maybe no one will be interested, or I'm so small, I almost disappear. And so there's a lot of elements of trauma and control and all these things that tend to fuel eating disorders. Not always, sometimes it's just, I just want to be thin, right? And fit in and be attractive. But there can be so many underlying things just like that, right? It's an interesting common thread, for sure. Anybody else? I don't want to ignore this side of the room. If anyone had a thought over here.
Or if you don't mind, I'll add one last thing.
Please.
It seems to me as though that, there are things that become, how to deal with things is we begin to think we'll try anything to deal with the problem. And, I believe I can safely make the statement that I'm the only person in this room who can remember, when psychedelics became popular in the 60s. And people would begin saying, you can actually look within your mind, if you can imagine.
Mhm.
Take this, look within your mind and go back. And I see, one of my friends and I were speaking of this, that, they're talking about microdoses now.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do we all think? In my own opinion only, I'm for trying everything. But I'm pretty anti-drug, but I have one exception. I believe antidepressant drugs have been proven to be extremely, I mean, my thought would be if something actually works, like parent talk therapy works, because the vast majority of people say it's beneficial. So I do remember when psychedelic drugs in the 60s, and for a few years, wow. But then the other thing is that whatever was in there in magnified, feel bad and work shells.
Right, right. It takes the good and makes it, it could go to the.
It makes it worse.
Sure.
So I guess I could just say that, I guess I'm anti-drug. With the one exception is this last, say, 30 years, I really think that whatever small detriment and antidepressant drugs is far outweighed So, but I am sort of amused with the kind of rise of psychedelics.
Sure. Yeah, and it really has taken off. I mean, I read an article last week. I know a lot about, like, a lot of my background when I was training to be a therapist was working with trauma. Like, so PTSD, complex PTSD, anxiety, trauma related disorders was something that I was really interested in, and attachment, right? Those are things that are kind of like my therapeutic background. And you know, when it comes to complex trauma or PTSD, there is this whole wave of like retreats where you go and you take a controlled substance to try and process it in a different way. I mean, but then people come out, I mean, the dangers, the list of dangers on these, that's slightly terrible. I mean, some of them can be fatal, and should it like not go. And so, yeah, there's, I mean, it's definitely two-sided coin, right? Like it tends to either augment things in either direction, but it is so popular right now. And we'll see what happens.
Let me say this as well. Any and every avenue that might possibly help a person in should be tried.
Sure,
That's something as well.
right. Whether it's effective or not, right? Sure. Mhm.
That's, well, yes.
And I also think it's important to know yourself too. Like if you know, everybody tends to have things that they're more comfortable trying. Some people would much rather go talk. Other people would much rather try medication. And I think those are things important to keep in mind too. But it is, there's always a wave of something, right? And psychology is nothing if not paradigm shift after shift, right? Like it's, you know, whatever is popular right now might not be popular in 2 years. And we might rename it and remove it from the DSM or add it to the DSM. It's so changing, right? Yeah.
I know everybody wants to move on to finish up one more piece of data.
Yeah.
Go with it. So when you say like, you know, treatments for depression, stuff, you mean like SSRI?
Yes.
So we found that, you know, SSRIs are kind of just treating the symptoms.
Mm.
And, you know, you see with like 70% efficacy, a single large trip is going to completely cure these people, you know, as well as that stimulation of the vagus nerve and things like that. Like all of these treatments, instead of just treating the symptoms, they're getting to the root cause.
That's so interesting. And we have new evidence about, I mean, there's a lot of evidence right now about the dangers of antidepressants. That's like a new thing now too, that antidepressants aren't actually working in the way that we think they are. And that's a very like current thing. So it can all change at any moment is the point, right? Like at any moment we can find out like, oh, this actually doesn't work or this actually does work. And like, we have to shift. It's wild, right? It is definitely a new wave, right? So I love the thoughts behind it, and that you're both so like reading. I love it. It makes me happy to hear that when you're reading and aware of these things, because it's very, very prevalent right now. We're trying to figure everything out. We're always learning, right? There's so much we don't know. Some causes, just to get back to this, in terms of time, eating disorders are very multidimensional, right? It's a multidimensional risk perspective, which means that the more factors you have going on, the more likely you are to develop an eating disorder. Okay, so we have psychological factors, interpersonal factors, biological ones, and the cultural and societal ones. Okay, so some psychological factors that are common, right? Very common that people who have eating disorders have low self-esteem. Okay, low self-esteem and eating disorders correlate very highly. We talked a lot about lack of control. That is a very common psychological like factor. People who feel out of control. They've had an incident in their life where they were out of control, and now they're grasping for control in any way possible. Trauma, right? We talked about that. Though that technically would go a little bit lower here, but feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, depression, mood disorders also correlate very highly with eating disorders. So psychological factors can include all of those things, right? And if people have those, it might make them more vulnerable. Interpersonal factors deals with other people. This one is huge for eating disorders, right? What are the messages that other people are giving you that may or may not reinforce your ideas about how you view yourself, right? Does your partner or your friend or your family member look at you when you eat something and be like, are you really going to eat that? You shouldn't eat that. Things that messages that people say to each other, family dynamics around food. Every family has their own culture around food. My family eats dessert like crazy. We are like dessert eaters, right? And my partner's family, a lot of them have diabetes. They don't eat dessert. I mean, I've conformed them, I've fixed them over time. Now they eat more dessert, right? But they didn't, right? We have very different family cultures. I remember my wife, like the first time we got a cake, she's like, why are we having cake? Because it's Tuesday. Like, why not? And she's all like, but nothing happened. Like, well, it's about to when we eat the cake, right? You know? Like, I mean, just every family has its own culture. But let's say your partner comments on you gaining weight, or the picture that they have of you on their phone or in their wallet or whatever, is of you when you were quite a bit thinner, right? Those messages seep in, right? Those things can be problematic. People getting bullied. Oh my gosh, people getting bullied is a big one. I have 3 daughters, right? I have experienced this already. They're 8 and 10. And my daughter when she was in kindergarten, 5 years old, right? My daughter Kaya is a bigger girl. She was born big. She's like always been on the high end of the growth chart. Like she's not overweight, like by much, like a little, maybe. Like she's a tummy like me. I'm sorry. She inherited it. She'll probably always have it. But she's always been tall and a little like bigger. In kindergarten, she kept coming home with her lunch, like not eaten. And like, it was like 3 weeks of her not eating her lunch. And we're like, why aren't you eating your lunch? You got to eat your lunch, you know? And she'd be like, not really give us an explanation. Like, oh, I want to play. I'm busy. Like, you know, I ran out of time. And it kept going and going. And we would dig and dig and dig because, you know, like I'm a psychologist and her mom is, you know, like teaches at like high school and has a human development background and lifespan development. It came out this girl was bullying her, Addison. I hate Addison. This kid has like followed her through every grade. Like, I'll be waiting for you in the parking lot, Addison, and she's on my list, right? But this kid like was telling me, well, that's not healthy. You shouldn't eat that. And so my daughter stopped eating lunch because this girl was telling her that she was fat and should stop eating. And like my poor kid was like, I'm hungry, but I don't want to be fat. Addison says I'm fat. I'm like, oh, well, Addison, let me go pick her apart. Like, I'm like, oh, I'll find something and tease Addison before I was ready to go to jail over Addison. I was ready to commit murder. And like, interestingly, Addison's still around and she bullies. She's just a bully. She always has been. But like my poor daughter was so terrified to eat because of the things that people were saying to her about her size, right? That started in kindergarten, right? This starts early for people. People get bullied, people get teased, ridiculed. The messages that partners or family members say. My father-in-law always looks at my mother-in-law and says like, Susan, are you really going to eat that? You don't need to eat that. And I'd be like, I hope you eat double now. Like, you're like, you know, just because he said you can't, right? Like, that's just how I am. But so much of this, right? The things that other people say to us and the messages they give us can influence the way we view ourselves, right? And again, if you ever see me in jail, it's because I killed Addison. I don't know. There's like a story of like Setmire went to jail. It's we have an Addison on our soccer team, and it's so hard for me to say her name because I just want to hate her because like, no, different Addison, right? I had to check. I was like, that's not Addison, right? Different. Biological factors play a role, but they're not the only role. They can't be, right? But you know, sometimes people don't get the right signals from their body, right? Of when they're hungry versus when they're full. This can be genetic. It can also be modeled. It's hard to tell. And then culture, huge, right? Culture plays a massive role in this, right? Our norms for beauty. We have very narrow definitions of beauty in our culture, right? Narrow for men, narrow for women. If you look at any pop culture magazine, right? Next time you're looking at a magazine, just look at the people. They're cookie cutters. They all look perfect. They're airbrushed. They look nothing like real people. If you've ever seen a celebrity in real life, they very rarely look like the person that you see in the media, right? They're very done up. Right. And Dove did a whole campaign years ago, right? Like showing how they manipulate this. I have this, and just in case you haven't seen it, I'll play it for you. But the image